Well, he'd better give them the virtual middle finger. Let's begin. It seems that Germany's finance minister, Christian Lindner, has extended an invite to the UK to cosy up on the Brexit sofa and improve the trade deal with the EU. It's like your ex inviting you out for coffee, isn't it? And then thinking, what's the catch? Now, Lindner has this standard invitation ready for future chats about reducing trade barriers and solving those pesky obstacles in daily business life, as he says. But hold on a minute, wasn't the whole point of Brexit to get out of the EU's grip and to diverge and do things our own way? But some government insiders seem to think that Germany's open arms for closer ties prove that Brexit naysayers were completely wrong. Otherwise, it's kind of like saying, I'll quit my job to start a band, but no, I'm back at the office. Oops. But Brexiteer Tories, on the other hand, aren't too thrilled about the invite, and I don't blame them. They're looking at it with suspicion, saying, what's the price tag on this one? It's like being handed a free dessert menu in a restaurant where you know that nothing is really free. Former cabinet member Simon Clarke also has a bone to pick, saying that getting a closer deal with the EU would require things like customs unions and single market membership, which, to be honest, is completely out of the question in my opinion. Because let's face it, that sort of crap was kind of like the stuff that us Brexiteers wanted to avoid like the plague. But David Jones, the deputy chairman for the European Research Group, throws a punch, saying that German companies might want to do business with the UK, but they shouldn't hold their breath. And the government source drops the mic with a firm, we won't be calling them. We have the TCA and we're not amending, changing or renegotiating it. Which unfortunately I've got a feeling Labour would just only love to do. And that's because meanwhile on the other side, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is saying he'd like a much better relationship with the EU if he wins the next election. But Brexiteers are side-eyeing this, suggesting that it's either empty words or a Trojan horse to basically undo Brexit. It's kind of like saying I'll have my salad today, but tomorrow I'll be back for my double bacon cheeseburger. In his case anyway. Christian Lindner's remarks have set fireworks off with the EU over trade negotiations. Marcos Servercook, who handled the Brexit trade deal, is saying no entry before 2026. And French MEP Nathalie Lerousseau seems a bit baffled by the German minister's remarks, saying they aren't coordinated with the EU 27 and don't consider the UK's position. It's like trying to choreograph a dance with a partner who's doing the Macarena while you're doing the moonwalk, isn't it? And then, of course, in a surprising twist, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen unveiled the dreaded Windsor Framework earlier this year. They say they're rewriting trade, VAT regulations and all sorts of EU laws for Northern Ireland, which in my opinion shouldn't actually be anywhere near Northern Ireland in the first place because they are part of the UK, not part of the EU. And therefore, if anything, it's kind of like saying, we've decided to redecorate the house after we've already moved out. But unfortunately, the massive kick on the gonads here is our strange decision to rejoin the EU's £85 billion Horizon Research Programme. It's kind of like rekindling a bad romance, isn't it, with an old flame who just basically won't F off. But of course they say that this one involves research projects about the climate crisis, terminal diseases and food security. Oh, and I'm guessing of course that us and the EU had another good old tit-for-tat argument over Northern Ireland Brexit arrangements in there somewhere. But anyway, the article says that a government spokesperson said that the Trade and Cooperation Agreement is the world's largest zero-tariff, zero-quota free trade deal. It secures the UK's market access across key service sectors and opens up new opportunities for the UK businesses across the globe. And they also say that following the Windsor Framework, both the UK and the EU have publicly committed to maximising the opportunities of the TCA even further. And in my own personal opinion, I think we should just went no deal straight away, like basically any other country would more than likely do if they left a trading relationship with another country. But of course, no, not us. And yes, before anyone says that the EU isn't a country, they basically think they are, don't they? The beloved BBC Newsnight is in for a little shake-up, isn't it? And it's got the budgetary guillotine hanging over its head. £5 million in cuts from an £8 million budget. It's like they're telling someone they can only have half of their dessert. So how does the BBC plan to cope with all these leaner times? Well, let's just say that they're causing a bit of a stir. Firstly, they lost their editor Stuart McLean, who decided to embark on an exotic adventure by becoming the BBC News Africa Bureau Chief. Maybe, who knows, he thought that chasing news stories in Africa would be a little less hair-raising experience than managing a dwindling budget. I mean, who can blame him, eh? But now, the remaining Newsnight staff are bracing themselves for an announcement about these colossal budget cuts. Critics are up in arms, claiming it will leave Newsnight in a mere shadow of its former self. and if anything has kind of like gone from a thrilling blockbuster movie in their eyes to a low-budget indie film. A few less explosions and special effects, well hey, I guess they think they've still got the special substance, right? But the thing is that some of these people are just a little bit worried that these cuts will basically weaken the argument for the TV licence, which basically now seems about as outdated as a floppy disk. In fact, actually, if the TV licence were a piece of technology, it would be an old brick mobile phone that we used to in the 1990s. Functional, but not exactly cutting edge, or even right to have nowadays. Now, of course, BBC executive and podcast presenter Roger Bolton has some thoughts. He's of the opinion that the BBC is gearing up for the future without the licence fee. Because let's face it, in the age of streaming services and on-demand content, who needs a TV licence to watch TV? It's kind of like, if anything, insisting on using a horse-drawn carriage in the era of self-driving cars. Of course, that's not all, is it? Because the BBC is looking to make a few extra quid on the side by handing over control of shows like Desert Island Discs and The Life Scientific to the BBC Studios, which admittedly says it's the BBC, but in fact it's their own separate company, from what I've heard anyway. It's like selling your vintage vinyl record collection for a bit extra pocket money, isn't it? I mean, sure, it makes sense from a business perspective, but it also means that some of the charm of the public service broadcasting might apparently be lost in the process. According to them, more than likely. But Roger Bolton is concerned that by moving Newsnight's journalists into a centralised unit, their ability to uncover the diverse range of stories might be hindered. It's kind of like saying, let's put all the world's cuisine into one big restaurant. I mean, sure, you'll have variety, wouldn't you? But will you still discover those hidden gems? Or bullcrap, in my opinion, because let's face it, if anything, I think the BBC is well trained in that. So what's the solution then? Well, Bolton thinks that the BBC should consult the public about what they want from their public broadcaster before making these drastic changes. But in the end, the BBC basically faces a bit of a tricky balancing act, doesn't it, between the budgetary constraints and presenting its unique role in the public service broadcasting, as they like to think. And if anything, I guess it's trying to walk a tightrope while juggling, and all your eyes are on them. And as for the TV licence, well, they might just be the modern day equivalent of a rotary phone, but isn't it about time you upgraded to a new smartphone? But anyway, the article says that in September, former BBC News chief Cathy Snell suggested that Newsnight should be scrapped entirely because only 300,000 people actually watch the programme, with the costs of £13 million to make. In line with other BBC News programmes, Newsnight figures have been fallen, and the BBC is shifting to digital output to reach the biggest possible audience, and this may prompt a complete format overhaul for the programme. The current team of 8 reporters is likely to be reduced, and there is talk of a debate and interview style show in the future. The changes apparently run the risk of narrowing the focus on the BBC's news output, but apparently could be vital to future-proofing the organisation as a whole. BBC bosses are already facing criticism over the TV licence costs, as the monthly payment option is apparently £238.50 for 12 months, which is £79.50 more than the upfront £159 fee. Although, to be honest, I think that might be if you're paying from one of those pay point things in the newsagents. But in January last year, the then Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries froze the licence fee at £159 until April 2024, forcing the BBC to make cuts of £285 million a year, and the BBC has declined to comment. That's a bit strange, isn't it? Well, just let me spill the beans on some recent UK immigration shenanigans, shall I? So our Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, seems to be on a bit of a mission to give the UK's immigration policies a little shake-up. The word on the street is apparently that she's planning to hike up the salary requirements for folks looking to call the UK their new home. And according to the Daily Mail, the magic number you'll need to earn to even consider a British adventure is now a cool £26,200 a year. Now, in case you're not a human calculator, that is apparently 28% less than the median salary of £33,280. Braverman's motivation here is apparently to put the kibosh on unskilled workers and their families making their way to the UK. Because let's face it, with the daily influx of illegal boat people, I'm guessing the numbers are probably going up quicker than they expected. And at the end of the day, surely wouldn't any limited places be better taken by skilled, trained people who can put something back into the country and things like that, rather than a low-paid, unskilled worker who's probably just after one thing? Although obviously, I could be wrong. Today, of course, the government has the points-based system, which is supposed to be compared to Australia's system, and of course was rolled out by Peter Patel back in 2020, and therefore would put the EU nationals on the same level as the rest of the world, so it's completely fair, with them not getting preferential treatment at all. But of course, it seems like at the minute, it's not exactly working out as promised, doesn't it? Here's the thing, Braverman obviously wants to curb immigration numbers before the Office of National Statistics, the ONS, drops its latest report. And yeah, I'm guessing that's probably because at the last general election, the Conservative Party apparently promised to reduce net migration, but the latest figures hit a record high last year. It's kind of like saying you're going to stop eating chocolate, but then the next day you find yourself in the chocolate factory. But in a quest to keep the numbers down, the Home Secretary decided to drop the mic in May by announcing that the students can't bring their family members to the UK anymore. And the new rules would only allow a handful of people coming to the UK to bring partners and their children. Because let's face it, the limit has to be drawn somewhere, doesn't it? But personally, I think as well as doing this, they should actually take the Australian Tony Abbott style approach and actually turn around all the boats that are coming from the safe country of France, because surely if they're coming from a safe country, then they can't be at risk at all, can they? But anyway, the article says in 2022 around 486,000 student visas were issued, up from 269,000 in 2019. Last year, however, the number of student visas given to dependents alone was 136,000, a huge increase from 2019 where 16,000 were reportedly given out. And it is believed that Braverman wanted to go further but was blocked by Chancellor Jeremy Hunt and Education Secretary Gillian Keegan, who were concerned about the economic impact of the harsher clampdown. Last month, the Home Secretary warned that immigration posed an existential threat to the West, and in a speech in Washington, she said that migration had been too much too quick. And of course, I don't know about you, but I personally agree with her. But of course, it doesn't end there, does it? Because in this video, someone actually gave them another bombshell, which let's face it, they wouldn't exactly like. Though I've got a feeling that a lot of us will probably think it's right.